I wasn't invited to my sister's wedding. I found out while standing at a family barbecue, holding a paper plate of macaroni salad that was starting to sweat in the June heat. My cousin Brooke wandered over from the grill, flipping her hair back with one hand, a hot dog in the other, and asked me the question that would crack my world open. "So, are you flying out for Lily's big day or just driving?" I blinked at her, confused. "What big day?" She laughed like I was joking. "The wedding, silly. She's finally marrying Derek." I smiled like I understood perfectly, then excused myself to sit in my car with the air conditioning on full blast, trying to remember how to breathe. Lily was my baby sister. I raised her after Dad died when I was just 17 and she was 9. I held her through her first panic attack in college, wired her rent money more times than I could count, stayed on the phone until 3 in the morning when she thought Derek was cheating. I was the one who mailed her a weighted blanket when anxiety kept her awake, the one who talked her through every breakdown, every doubt, every fear. And now she was getting married, with flowers and a venue and a guest list that somehow didn't include me. They'd planned an entire wedding and I was the only one who looked surprised I wasn't there. I sat in that car for 20 minutes, watching condensation drip down the windows, trying to sort through what I was feeling. Hurt, anger, confusion, all of it tangled together like Christmas lights you can't untangle. Through the windshield, I could see my mother in her pale blue summer dress, laughing with Brooke, looking perfectly at ease, like the world was exactly as it should be. I waited 2 days before calling her. Not because I needed time to calm down. I wasn't even angry, really. Just hollow. I needed to hear her say it out loud, needed to know if she'd admit they'd planned all of this without telling me. She answered on the second ring. "Hi, honey," she said in that efficient voice she used with everyone, warm but distant. I could picture her in the kitchen, wiping down counters, phone tucked between her shoulder and cheek. "Is Lily getting married?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. There was a pause, the sound of a refrigerator door closing. "Well, yes, next month actually," she said like I'd asked about the weather. "We didn't know if you'd be free." "I didn't know it was happening," I said. She gave a light laugh, the kind that dismisses everything. "Oh, Morgan, don't be dramatic." That word felt like a slap. It was the same tone she'd used when I cried at Dad's funeral and she told me to pull myself together, the same one she'd used when I called her sobbing after losing my job 5 years ago. "Don't catastrophize, sweetheart. You'll land on your feet." I let silence fill the space between us. "You know," she continued, "Lily really wanted something small, just family." "I am family," I said quietly. She sighed. "Yes, but you're always traveling and these things get complicated. Derek's parents had a lot of input and there were limited spots, you understand?" I didn't understand, but I knew better than to say it. "You're not mad, are you?" she asked, her voice softer now. "I'm not sure what I am," I told her. Another silence, heavier this one. "We thought it would be easier this way, less pressure on everyone." Easier. That was the word that stayed with me after we hung up. It wasn't that they'd forgotten me, it's that I was the easy one to erase. I stared at my phone for a long time after that call ended, then I opened my calendar and scrolled to the wedding date. Nothing scheduled, no RSVP, no seat saved, just empty white space where I should have been. I thought about the night Dad died, how I was 17 and Lily was 9, how she crawled into my bed and sobbed into my shoulder until she fell asleep. I remembered being 22 and wiring her $300 for rent because she'd spent her paycheck on textbooks. I remembered the phone call at 2 in the morning when she thought Derek was cheating, how I stayed awake with her until the sun came up, talking her through it. I'd sent her that weighted blanket during her first semester of grad school when panic attacks kept her up at night, included a note that said, "I'm always here." But I wasn't there now, not because I was busy or traveling or unavailable, because they hadn't asked me to be. I didn't post anything angry online. I didn't call Lily to demand explanations or draft long messages no one would answer. Instead, I opened my laptop and bought a ticket to Iceland. One way. Departure date, 3 days before the wedding. I didn't tell anyone, not my coworkers, not my neighbor who usually grabbed my mail, not even Ashley who knew me better than anyone and had stood beside me through 2 breakups and a career crisis. I just stopped responding to messages. That Friday, I submitted a vacation request, packed a single suitcase, and left one sticky note on my fridge that said, "Gone, don't wait up." The flight from Boston to Reykjavik was silent. I didn't watch movies or read, just stared at the flight map on the tiny screen, watching the white line arc over Greenland like a scar across the world. By sunrise, I was standing in a rental cabin carved into a hillside of volcanic rock, half covered in moss and complete silence. The lake outside looked frozen even though it wasn't. The windows fogged over every morning, and the shower smelled faintly of sulfur. I loved it immediately. For 24 hours, I didn't touch my phone. The silence wasn't lonely, it was clean. No one needed anything from me here. No one expected me to show up or help or fix things. I was just a person in a cabin by a lake, drinking coffee and watching fog roll across the water. On the second day, I walked down to the lagoon. There was a wooden bench half buried in snow, and I sat there until I couldn't feel my hands anymore. The cold felt good, sharp and real. I took a photo with my phone, nothing fancy, just me in a wool coat sitting by still water under a white sky. I wasn't smiling. I posted it to my Instagram story with no caption, no explanation, just the image. Within 10 minutes, the view list lit up. Lily, Brooke, my mother. No one sent a message. No one asked where I was or if I was okay. They just looked. And that was exactly what I wanted. Not their concern, just their awareness. I wanted them to see me somewhere they weren't, living a life that didn't revolve around their needs. I posted nothing the next day. I just lived. I drank bitter coffee from a ceramic mug, watched the fog roll in, wrote in my journal. Not poetry, just lists of things I didn't have to do here. No small talk, no pretending I was fine, no gift registry, no RSVP. Just me and the sound of ice shifting in the wind. I figured out when the wedding was the same way you learn most family secrets, through social media breadcrumbs. My cousin Trish posted a boomerang of champagne flutes with a caption that said "Love is in the air," and someone else tagged a boutique hotel 2 hours outside Albany. That was enough. Saturday morning in Iceland was silver and quiet. I sat by the window with a blanket over my legs and watched pale light creep slowly across the lake. There were no church bells here, no wedding playlists, no bridesmaids laughing behind closed doors, just snow and steam and stillness. I made oatmeal. I didn't check my phone. By late afternoon, the wedding had probably started. Maybe Lily was walking down an aisle in something white and sleeveless, our mother crying on cue. I imagined soft lighting, pastel flowers, filtered joy. And somewhere in the rows of seats, there would be a space where I should have been. Not obviously empty. They'd have rearranged things or filled the seat. But I knew where I was supposed to be, and I wasn't there. That evening, I posted a new photo. Just my hand holding a ceramic cup against the backdrop of the frozen lake. The sky was pale lavender, my nail polish chipped slightly on one finger. Nothing glamorous, nothing staged, no caption. Again, the view list rolled in within minutes. Lily, my mother. 2 of her friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Still no one messaged. Still nothing was said. But this time I could feel it. The quiet had shifted. It was no longer absence. It was presence deliberately withheld. I imagined them scrolling through their phones between dances or dessert, seeing my post in a moment of pause and wondering what it meant. It meant I knew. It meant I was watching, not out of jealousy or spite, but because I had once mattered here and now, I didn't. Not enough to be invited, but enough to haunt the edges of their celebration. I didn't post again for 2 days. I let them sit with the silence, let them fill it with whatever story they needed to tell themselves. I had nothing more to add. I spent those days walking along frozen shores, sitting in cafes that smelled like cardamom, reading the same book without retaining a single word. The quiet wasn't punishment, it was protection. For the first time in years, no one could ask me to be strong, to be helpful, to show up and hold things together. I was just Morgan, sitting by a lake in Iceland, finally learning what it felt like to be still. 3 days after the wedding, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was barely 6 in the morning, and outside, the sky was pale gray, the kind of color that makes you forget the sun exists. The phone kept buzzing, messages and missed calls piling up. At first, I thought someone had died, but the names on the screen told a different story. My aunt, Brooke, my mother, then Lily's college roommate, and finally Ashley, the only person who ever told me the truth. Her message was short. "You need to see this." She'd attached a link to a TikTok video with no context, just a thumbnail of what looked like a reception hall and something blurry flying through the air. I hesitated, not sure I wanted to know, but I clicked it anyway. The video started mid-chaos. Shouting, gasps, movement everywhere. A woman was screaming, not in joy but in fury, her voice cracking as she threw a bouquet across the room. People were standing, turning, backing away from something. Someone knocked over a centerpiece and glass shattered off screen. Then the camera found Lily. She was crying, not delicate tears but full body sobs, mascara running down her face. She was yelling something I couldn't make out through the distorted audio. Then another voice came through clearer, sharper. "You were my best friend Lily, my maid of honor, and you were sleeping with him the whole time." The voice belonged to Vanessa, her best friend since freshman year, the girl who'd helped plan the bachelorette trip, the same girl who apparently had been planning to marry Derek herself. My stomach dropped. Another guest's voice, half laughing in disbelief, said, "That's the maid of honor." The camera panned just enough to catch Derek frozen between them, hands raised like he was trying to calm wild animals. He said something no one could hear. It didn't matter. The crowd had already started moving, guests whispering and grabbing coats and purses. One woman walked out still holding her napkin. The video ended with Lily sinking to the floor in her wedding dress. I watched it twice, then turned my phone over and stared at the wooden beams of my cabin ceiling. Outside, a bird made a sound I couldn't name. The buzzing started again. Voicemails, missed calls, new texts piling on top of old ones. "Please call me. Your sister's a mess. We need you home. Morgan, please." By noon, I had a voicemail from my mother, her voice wobbling like a bad radio signal. "Lily's not eating," she said. "The family's embarrassed. People are talking. She didn't mention me being right. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask how I was. She just said, 'We don't know what to do without you.'" I sat at the window with my bare feet pressed against the cold floor, watching the lake ripple under wind. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Vanessa. Not a call, just a message. "I'm sorry you weren't there. You probably would have stopped me. She was wrong. I wouldn't have stopped her. I would have let the truth find its way in, just like I did." By early afternoon, my phone had stopped ringing and started pleading. The voicemails were no longer brisk or annoyed. They were softer now, afraid. My mother left 6 in under 3 hours, each one a little more desperate than the last. "Morgan," she whispered in the third one, her voice cracking in places it never used to. "Your sister is devastated. She hasn't left her room since Saturday. We don't know what to say to her. We need you home. You've always been the strong one, the one who holds everyone together." That line again, the strong one. The one who knew how to carry things but was never allowed to be carried. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. And now that everything was falling apart, they wanted the scaffolding back. But I wasn't made of steel anymore. I had become glacier, cold and still and unmovable. It was almost midnight when the phone rang again. This time I picked up. Not out of forgiveness, not because I'd softened. I just didn't want the silence to say everything for me. "Morgan," my mother breathed, like she'd been holding her voice for hours. I didn't speak. She waited, then filled the space the way she always did, with explanation disguised as care. "She's not doing well," she said quietly. "Lily, she barely eats. She doesn't come downstairs. She keeps asking if you've responded." I could hear the clink of something ceramic in the background, her kitchen probably, the same blue teacup she always used when she needed to appear gentler. "I wish you were here," she added softly. I looked out the window at the lake, turned to glass under moonlight. The sky was low and endless, the kind of cold that made sound feel smaller. "I was here," I said finally, "for years. You just didn't see me." There was a pause, not defensive or quick, just still. "I didn't know you felt that way," she said, her voice thinner now. You never said. No one asked, I replied. She let out a breath, not quite a sigh, just the sound of realizing there's no script left that works. I'm sorry, she said, but it came out like a question, uncertain and unfinished. I didn't answer. Somewhere in that silence she understood, because for once she didn't try to fix it. No excuses, no soft rewrites of history, just the sound of her breathing, the faint chime of a clock in the background, the quiet of two people realizing something had ended a long time ago, and this was just the echo. Are you coming home? She asked after a while. I looked around the cabin, the wooden floor, the wool blanket on the chair, the sound of wind against windows. Everything simple. Everything mine. No, I said gently. I think I'm finally home. We didn't say goodbye. We just let the call fade. I sat there for a while, listening to the quiet. It didn't hurt anymore. It didn't comfort me either. It just felt true. The next morning I woke early. The cabin was still, the kind of stillness that doesn't ask anything from you. I wrapped myself in a thick sweater and stepped onto the back deck. The lake below was smooth as glass, reflecting pale gold from a rising sun. The sky stretched wide and empty, and for once, that emptiness felt like peace. I made tea, scribbled a few lines in my journal, then pulled out thick stationery I'd brought from home but never used. I wrote one letter, short and plain. No accusations, no lists of what had been done or left undone. Just this. I hope you find peace. I hope you tell the truth. I hope next time the invitation comes before the apology. Morgan. I signed it with my full name, folded it carefully, addressed it to the house I grew up in. No return address. I walked into town later that day and dropped it in a red post box near a bakery that smelled like cardamom and ash. The man behind the counter nodded as I passed, recognizing me from mornings before. Cold today, he said. I smiled. Not as much as yesterday. On the way back, I stopped by the edge of the lagoon. A single bench faced the water. I sat for a while sipping coffee from a paper cup, watching steam rise and disappear into cold air. My phone was still in my pocket, untouched. When I returned to the cabin, I posted one last photo. A wooden chair, empty, framed by snow. Beyond it, the lake stretched out under pale sky. No caption. I knew they'd see it, not because they followed me closely, but because people always notice what's missing once it's been quiet for too long. That night, I didn't check messages, didn't scroll, didn't wonder what they were saying back home. Instead, I made soup, lit a candle, pulled a blanket across my lap, and read the same page of a book 3 times. Not because I was distracted, but because I wasn't in a hurry to leave the quiet. There was no victory in this, just clarity, no closure, just space. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I just felt free. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories like this one.
The mashed potatoes hadn't even cooled when Jenna smirked. Fork poised, voice sugar-coated. You have 1 week to leave. It was said like a joke. A casual flick of power across roasted vegetables and linen napkins. My sister leaned back in her chair like a queen delivering exile. I looked around the table. Mom didn't flinch. She just nodded, sipping her wine. Dad stared at his plate. Silent. Complicit. I set my fork down. Slow. Deliberate. No tremble. I'm sorry, I asked, even though I wasn't. Jenna dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin. We've decided it's time. You've had your run here. It's just not your house anymore. I watched the betrayal move like a ghost between their glances. Coordinated. Clean. They'd talked about this. Probably over group texts and fake hugs. Behind closed doors while I scrubbed floors and fixed leaky pipes in the very house they now wanted me gone from. No one asked how the roof got replaced, how the utilities stayed on, how Grandma's garden still bloomed. That was me. But they never saw me. I was just here. The extra daughter. The one who didn't move away or chase a big job or marry into some Pinterest-worthy family. I stayed. Kept the house standing. And this dinner? Was the thank you. 1 week. Jenna raised her glass. No hard feelings, right? I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into the tote bag at my feet, pulled out a thick folder, set it on the table with a soft thud. They looked at it like it might explode. I opened it, turned the first page toward them. Property title, 712 East Willow Street. Owner, Danielle Monroe. Transfer date, August 11th, 2 years before Grandma passed. Jenna blinked. Mom's wineglass paused midair. Dad looked up for the first time in 20 minutes. I slid the next document across the table. Recorded deed. Notarized.
Filed.
Valid. I leaned forward.
Calm. Precise.
Actually, you have 24 hours. Jenna's smirk evaporated. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. Dad stared. Forks dropped. The potatoes went cold. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't cry. I just stood, smoothed my blouse, and said, "Dessert's in the fridge. Help yourselves. It's your last night here." I walked out of the dining room. Behind me, chairs scraped. Whispers exploded. But I didn't stop, because they thought they were delivering judgment. But I'd already delivered notice. My name is Danielle Monroe. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because the day they tried to evict me from the house I saved was the day they learned who really owned the foundation they stood on. And tomorrow, they'd be standing on sidewalk. They never saw me. Not really. I was the girl who stayed behind. While Jenna graduated with a fancy degree and a perfectly filtered life, I was wiping counters in the same kitchen I grew up in, helping Grandma after her second fall, picking up groceries, covering bills when her pension ran short. When Dad lost his job, it was me who paid the electric. When Mom had her episode, it was me who sat by her bed with tea and silence. And when Grandma died, they all cried at the funeral. But I'm the one who cleaned her house while they sorted through her jewelry. I stayed. I painted the porch. I fixed the water heater. I cooked dinners in a home that didn't feel like mine because I was always told it wasn't. "You're just lucky we let you stay here," Mom used to say. As if I was a guest. As if Grandma didn't sit me down one rainy evening, 2 years before she passed, and say, "They'll circle like vultures when I'm gone. So, I'm giving you the deed now. Quietly. You're the only one who stayed. You earned this." She had her lawyer come to the house that same week. Signed the papers. Made it official. No drama. No announcement. Just the truth, written in ink. But I didn't tell anyone, because I didn't need applause. I needed protection. So I filed the deed, kept up the taxes, and let them keep pretending they'd inherited something from a woman they hadn't called in months. And when Jenna moved back in after her second divorce, I didn't say no. I gave her the guest room, listened to her cry about alimony and designer handbags, let her take the last muffin, borrow my car, mock my clothes. She called me a charity case. Said, "You still shop at clearance racks, huh?" I laughed it off, because I was used to being the background character in her movie. But what she didn't know was that I was producing the set. When she started bringing Mom around more, I saw it coming. The whispers behind doors. The fake kindness. Then the family meeting. The dinner where they told me I had 1 week to leave. Like they were doing me a favor by warning me. Like I didn't have every receipt of what I paid to keep this house standing. Jenna was used to winning through charm. Mom was used to controlling through guilt. Dad, he was just used to disappearing. And me? I was the girl with the quiet voice and the iron spine. The one who watched, learned, documented. The one they thought would cry. But the thing is, you can't evict someone from their own house, especially when she holds the title. And now, they were about to learn that the invisible heir was never a guest. She was the landlord, and rent was past due. It didn't happen overnight. No betrayal ever does. It starts in whispers, in glances exchanged when you enter a room, in accidental omissions, in the tightening of a smile that used to be real. The first sign? Jenna stopped contributing to groceries, then to utilities. "Things are tight right now," she'd say, while wearing a new watch. Mom started spending more nights at the house too. Said she just missed her girls. What she really missed? Control. She started rearranging things, kitchen shelves, photos, routines. One day, I found Grandma's quilt folded and shoved in the attic. She would have wanted a cleaner look, Mom said. Then came the visits from that real estate agent. At first, Jenna pretended she didn't know him. Oh, he's just a friend. Wanted to see the place. But I saw the tape measure. The way he took notes. The way they called the house a transitional space. That was their plan. To transition me out. They figured they could wear me down.
Pretend it was a family decision.
For everyone's future. I'd been through this with them before. When Dad sold off Grandma's car behind her back. When Mom borrowed her medical money and forgot to pay it back. When Jenna promised to care for Grandma after surgery and never showed up. They always came back when it was convenient. When there was something left to take. So I waited.
Watched.
Smiled through dinner even when it tasted like manipulation. And then, they pushed. Jenna brought it up at the table like she was offering me a deal. You can take the little apartment over on 5th. We'll help you set up.
We. Like they were unit now.
I set my glass down. I live here. I said plainly. Jenna blinked. You've been here. Doesn't mean it's yours. Mom nodded slowly. We just think you'd be happier somewhere smaller. Less burden. I looked at Dad. He didn't even meet my eyes. That's when I knew it was already decided. They were going to claim the house. Sell it maybe. Or move in and hand me a deadline. They didn't expect a fight. I was too quiet. Too agreeable. I was the one who always stepped aside. But not this time. I stood up. Went to my room. Pulled out the folder I'd been saving for 2 years. The deed. The notarized paperwork. The tax receipts. The upgrade contracts in my name. I didn't storm back into the dining room. I returned calmly.
Sat down.
Let Jenna finish her wine. And then, I opened the folder. Their plan was clean.
But mine?
Was signed, sealed, and legal. They thought I was still the extra daughter. But they forgot. I was the one who stayed. The one Grandma chose. And that house was already mine. They just hadn't gotten the memo.
Yet.
I didn't raise my voice. Didn't scream.
Didn't cry.
That would have made it easier for them to write me off as emotional, irrational, unstable. No, I used something much colder.
Paper.
Danielle, what is this? Jenna asked, staring at the deed like it had grown fangs. Her voice had dropped an octave. The smirk was gone. Mom leaned forward. You filed this? I turned the page slowly. Transfer of ownership. Danielle Monroe. Grantor. Margaret Monroe. Witnessed. Notarized. Filed with the county clerk. Grandma had been precise. She didn't believe in half measures. She'd told me, when you do something, do it with paperwork. Words fade. Signatures stay. I slid the next form across the table. Record of tax payments. Property ID 113-046B. Every payment since the transfer? Made by me. Utilities? My name. Repairs? My card. Jenna started to say something, but I raised my hand, gently. There's one more. I pulled out a manila envelope. Inside, a formal notice to vacate. Occupants without legal right or lease must vacate within 24 hours or be subject to legal removal. Jenna blinked like she'd been slapped. You're evicting us? No, I said quietly. I'm asking you to leave something that was never yours. But you didn't tell us. I didn't owe you an explanation, I replied. This house has stood on my shoulders for 10 years. I was just keeping it warm, until you all tried to burn it down. Mom looked pale. Dad finally spoke. Sweetheart, let's not make this permanent. I turned to him slowly. You made it permanent the second you watched them dismantle my place at this table and said nothing. The silence was louder than any yelling could have been. They stared at the papers like they couldn't read English. But they knew exactly what they meant. Jenna stood abruptly. This isn't over. I leaned back in my chair. It is for you. She opened her mouth, probably to throw some insult she learned from a Real Housewives episode. I stood too.
Calm. Certain.
I've already contacted the sheriff's office. If you're not gone by tomorrow at noon, I'll have the locks changed and your things moved to the curb. Mom looked horrified. You're throwing out your family? I met her gaze.
No. You did.
The minute you tried to erase me from a home I bled to protect. They walked out together, stunned and seething. And when the front door slammed, I exhaled. I stood in the middle of Grandma's living room, the one she crocheted in, the one I vacuumed every week, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Not granted.
Claimed.
I didn't sleep that night. I cleaned. Deep cleaned. Lit candles. Played Grandma's favorite records. And when the sun rose, I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, deed on the table beside me. Because I wasn't going anywhere. And they had 24 hours. They didn't believe I'd do it. Not really. Not Jenna, who always got her way with tantrums dressed as monologues. Not Mom, who could cry guilt like a faucet. Not Dad, whose silence they mistook for diplomacy. But at 8 a.m. sharp, the locksmith arrived. He was early. I'm not changing the locks just yet, I said, sipping my coffee. They've got until noon. He nodded. You want me to wait in the truck? No, I said with a smile. You're my insurance policy. Park out front. At 8:23 a.m., Jenna showed up. Hair in a bun.
Sunglasses on.
Phone pressed to her ear like a weapon. I'm calling a lawyer. I handed her a copy of the deed. Again. Have them read this, I said. And make sure they can explain the part about trespassing. She yanked open the front door, the one she no longer had a right to touch, and stormed in. 10 minutes later, Mom arrived in a bathrobe and fury. You can't do this, Danielle. I leaned on the porch rail. I already did. But we're family. Then you should have treated me like it. She walked right past me into the house. The packing began in rage. Jenna slammed drawers. Mom shouted about heirlooms. I stayed outside. The neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Some waved. They'd seen me mow this lawn every weekend. Fix the siding. Carry groceries for Grandma before she passed. They knew. At 10:41 a.m., Dad showed up. Alone. Quiet. He walked up the steps, didn't say anything for a while. Then, you really filed all that paperwork? I nodded. She gave it to me 2 years before she died, I said. Said she knew they'd try this. He sighed. She always did trust you more. Then why didn't you? He didn't answer, just looked down at his shoes. I handed him a box of his old records from the den. Noon, I said. Not 1 minute after. He nodded.
Didn't argue.
At 11:58 a.m., they were all outside. Boxes stacked. Rage brewing. Mom tried once more. Where are we supposed to go? You didn't ask me that when you were pushing me out, I replied. You just said I'd be happier elsewhere. I looked at Jenna. How's elsewhere sound to you now? The locksmith stepped up. Toolkit ready. I turned the key one last time. The door clicked shut. New locks turned in place. And just like that, the house was mine again. All mine. No ghosts pacing the hall. No judgment in the kitchen. No footsteps stealing Grandma's peace. They stood on the lawn like strangers, blinking in the daylight of their own downfall. I didn't wave. I didn't threaten. I just stood at the window and watched. Because sometimes revenge isn't fire. It's eviction. And theirs was long overdue. 3 days after the locks clicked shut, Jenna filed a complaint. She claimed I forged the deed. That Grandma wasn't in her right mind when she transferred ownership. That I manipulated her. The court clerk dismissed it before it even made it to a hearing. The signatures were clean. The notary was long-standing. The records matched every tax payment. I didn't need to fight. The truth had already done that for me. The only call I got from Jenna after that? A voicemail. You'll regret this. You're going to end up alone. I didn't delete it. I saved it. As a reminder of how small people get when they lose control over you. Mom didn't call at all. But I did get an envelope in the mail a week later. No return address. Inside was a torn photo. Me as a child on Grandma's lap. Both of us smiling in the garden. Ripped down the middle. Message received. Dad was quieter. I got a birthday card in the mail. No note. No name. Just a gift card to the same coffee shop Grandma used to take me to. I sat with that one a little longer, because even silence can carry weight. Meanwhile, I rebuilt. I repainted the hallway walls, replanted Grandma's roses, turned the guest room into a reading nook, the formal dining room into a workspace. I didn't fill the silence with noise. I filled it with purpose. For the first time in years, the house felt like mine, not because of paperwork, because of peace. One evening, the neighborhood association dropped off a welcome package, even though I'd lived there for over a decade. A card was tucked inside. "We always thought it was yours anyway. Glad it's official now." I smiled, not because they said it, but because I no longer needed anyone to. Jenna, from what I heard, moved into a condo with her third fiancé. Apparently, he owns a crypto startup. Or something. She tried launching a podcast. It fizzled. Mom started freelancing as an interior decorator. Used photos of Grandma's house, my house, in her online portfolio. I sent a cease and desist. Dad stopped showing up altogether. Somehow, that part hurt the least. Because I stopped expecting a man who never showed up in the first place. One day, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the light hit the steps just like it used to when Grandma sat there with me in spring. And I realized something. I wasn't mourning them. I was mourning the idea of them. The illusion that if I just gave enough, they'd finally treat me like I belonged. But I do belong. I always did. They just didn't see it because they were too busy looking in the mirror. Now, I didn't need their reflection. I had built my own. One made of bricks, roots, and silence that finally felt like freedom. 6 months later, I hung a sign on the newly painted porch. Monroe Studio and Design, by appointment only. It wasn't just a home anymore. It was a business, a legacy, an answer to the question they never thought I could ask. What if I stopped surviving and started building? Clients came slowly at first. Local artists, boutique owners, a teacher who needed help redesigning her reading space on a shoestring budget. They didn't care about my degree or lack of one. They cared that I listened, that I created peace with paintbrushes and purpose, that the girl they once called the quiet one had a gift for turning old rooms into sanctuaries. Word spread. Not viral, not fast,
but deep.
People came because they heard the energy in my space healed things. The first newspaper piece called me the silent architect of serenity. Another headline read, "She lost her family and found her foundation." I didn't give interviews. I didn't need to. The house spoke loud enough now. I started hosting creative nights, sanctuary sessions, where women brought wine, grief, and dreams too long delayed. We painted. We cried. We rebuilt. Some had been left by lovers. Others abandoned by their own blood. One woman whispered, "This place feels like my grandmother's arms." And I knew exactly what she meant. The house had changed. But not out of bitterness. Out of becoming. The kitchen had laughter again. Music played in the mornings. The couch was no longer where my sister scrolled and judged. It was where strangers sat and found softness. One afternoon, I found a sticky note on the front door, written in delicate handwriting. I walked by with my daughter. She asked who lived here. I said, "A woman who decided she didn't need permission to stay." I kept that note on my studio wall, not because I needed affirmation, but because every time I looked at it, I remembered the truth. I wasn't the spare daughter. I wasn't the placeholder. I was the foundation. The reason the house never fell. The reason Grandma died knowing her legacy wouldn't be sold to the highest bidder.
And now?
Now I was more than just a survivor of betrayal. I was a creator, a builder, a woman who stood in the very space they tried to take and turned it into a throne of soft power. I didn't need revenge. I needed walls that didn't echo with resentment. I needed peace that didn't ask me to shrink. And most of all, I needed a future that wasn't tied to anyone's approval. So I built one brushstroke at a time, one contract at a time, one memory overwritten by something better. And in the middle of it all,
me.
The daughter they forgot, the woman they underestimated. Now the name on every deed, every receipt, every doorbell chime. Monroe.
Not just a last name.
A rebirth. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when I heard the knock. 3 soft raps. Not urgent. Not angry. Just tired. I opened the door slowly, half expecting a delivery. Maybe a neighbor. But there she stood. Jenna. Hair soaked, hoodie pulled tight. No makeup. No heels. No attitude. Just a shadow of the girl who once sat at my dinner table and told me, "You have 1 week to leave." She didn't speak right away. Neither did I. Her eyes scanned the porch, the new sign, the fresh paint, the potted lavender Grandma always loved. Then, softly, "It's beautiful." I stepped aside, but didn't invite her in. She got the message. She stood under the awning, dripping. "I lost the apartment," she said. "The crypto guy? Turns out charm doesn't pay rent." I said nothing. She exhaled. "I was awful to you." Still, I said nothing. I don't even remember why I hated you so much. Maybe because you made staying look stronger than leaving. That one stung. Because it was true. "Mom's been staying with me," she added. "She won't say it, but she misses you. Dad moved in with a cousin. No one talks much anymore." The family fell apart after I left?
No.
They just finally noticed the glue was gone. I came to ask, her voice cracked. "If there's a way back. For me." I looked her dead in the eye.
Calm. Clear. No.
She blinked. "Danielle. You said I'd regret this. That I'd end up alone. But I've never been more surrounded by peace. By people who see me.
Who pay.
Who stay." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I was just scared," she whispered. I nodded. "So was I. And I still chose to be kind. You chose to conquer." She dropped her gaze. I reached behind the door, pulled out a small box. Inside, her old journals, a few earrings, a photo of her and Grandma I found behind the dresser. "I figured you might come eventually." She took the box with shaking hands. "I'm sorry."
"I believe you," I said.
"But I also remember you." She nodded, stepped back. Then, just before turning away, she said, "You were always the strong one."
We just didn't want to see it.
I closed the door without a word. Not because I hated her. Because I didn't need her anymore. Not for love. Not for approval. Not even for closure. I stood in my entryway, listening to the soft patter of rain against the windows. Then walked to my studio, lit a candle, picked up a brush, and painted a single line down a blank canvas. The beginning of something new.
Because this was the end.
Not of the house,
but of the hold they had on me.
They thought they were cutting me off, that they could evict me from a life they barely understood. But they didn't realize. I was the deed. I was the foundation. I was the key.
And now?
The door only opens for peace.
The soup wasn't just hot. It was scalding. And it didn't spill. It was poured. Deliberately. Slowly. Like a ritual of humiliation. One moment, I was seated at their dinner table, smiling, holding my spoon, trying to belong. The next, I was drenched in mushroom bisque. Her voice came before the burn faded. "Beggar, you are of no use. Get out of here." Everyone froze. No one gasped. Not even Derek, my fiancé, who sat across from me, folding his napkin like nothing had happened. His mother, Vivian, stood over me, holding the now empty ball like she would won a war. I didn't move. The soup dripped down my blouse, into my lap, staining the one dress I'd bought just for this dinner, to impress them. Derek finally looked up. And what he said next, that's what truly broke me. My mother always tells the truth. He didn't check if I was burned. Didn't flinch at the cruelty. He leaned back in his chair and added, "She's right. I made a mistake thinking someone like you was worthy of marriage." The silence rung in my ears. "From this moment on," he continued, "we're done." Vivian sat down calmly, smug, as if she would swatted a fly. Everyone else pretended not to know me. And me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood up slowly, soup-soaked, spine straight. I placed my napkin on the table. Adjusted my coat, wet, but still dignified. Then I looked Derek dead in the eye. "Thank you," I said quietly. He blinked. For what? For saving me a lifetime of regret. I turned to his mother.
And thank you for making your character louder than my presence ever could. I walked out with my heels clicking against marble tile, the soup cooling on my skin but my fury boiling inside.
I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. Because they didn't deserve my rage. They only deserved the consequences. My name is Naomi Pierce.
And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me.
Because the woman they tried to drown in soup, she didn't burn. She ignited. And the man who thought he discarded me was about to walk into an office that belonged to me and choke on the taste of his mistake. I didn't come from privilege. No trust fund. No family name on a hospital wing. No safety net. Just grit. And silence. My mother was a janitor.
My father, a man who ran from bills, from fatherhood, from us.
I learned young that if you wanted a seat at the table, you had to build the chair yourself. With splinters. With calluses. With your teeth if you had to.
By 27, I was the youngest coup at a Fortune pound sauce subsidiary. By 28, I'd negotiated to multi-million-dollar mergers that saved the company from collapse.
By 29, I was engaged to a man who asked me to dim all of that down.
Babe, Derek would say, hand on mine at dinners, don't mention work too much around mom. She thinks ambition in women is aggressive.
I nodded. I wore beige instead of bold colors. Stopped leading with my title.
Called myself a consultant instead of an executive.
I let him hold the spotlight even when I built the stage. I didn't do it because I was weak. I did it because I thought love meant compromise. I thought maybe if I just softened the edges a little, his family would let me in. Instead, they mistook my grace for groveling. I paid for our first apartment.
He told people it was a gift from his parents. I coached him through job interviews, rewrote his resume, prepped him on strategy.
When he landed a role in the firm where I had quite influence, he never mentioned my name. And I never asked him to. Because I believed in building silently.
But silence, I have learned, is only noble when it's chosen.
What I had been doing was suppressing, minimizing, enduring. And that dinner, that soup, that public execution. It wasn't just a breakup. It was a revelation.
Because the moment Derek sided with his mother, the moment he discarded me like I was nothing but an inconvenience to their designer dinner plates, I realized something sharp and searing.
They never feared losing me. Because they never understood who I really was. They thought I was replaceable. Expendable. A girl who looked good on his arm but wouldn't make noise when shoved off. They had no idea that the woman they tried to humiliate was the one signing checks in rooms they would never be invited to. But they were about to learn. Because the silence they mistook for weakness. That was just me holding my breath while the match caught flame. And when it did, it wouldn't just burn the memory of that night. It would brand a lesson into every smug smile they ever wore. The smell of soup followed me home.
It soaked into my coat, my dress, my hair.
Every step I took echoed with the same words that had rung through that dining room. Beggar.
You are of no use.
I threw the dress into a trash bag the moment I walked through the door. Not out of shame, but because it was no longer mine. It belonged to the moment they tried to erase me. I stood in the shower, letting the water scald away the taste of humiliation. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened my personal vault drive, the one no one knew about.
The one with contracts, executive records, company board memos.
And I stared at a document that had been sitting there since February.
Interim CEO nomination, Pierce, Naomi.
I'd never submitted it. I was next in line. The only candidate groomed for the position. But I'd paused when Derek proposed.
He told me the role would put a strain on our relationship.
He said, a woman in that kind of power position.
It changes things.
He was right. It changed everything. But not in the way he feared. Now, I wasn't asking permission. I called my mentor, the current CEO. Told her I was ready. She would be waiting for that call. She said the board would meet tomorrow at subah ke 8 baje. And that by 9:00, the position would be mine. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was nervous. Because I was awake. For the first time in months, when morning came, I dressed simply. A navy blue suit, clean makeup, sharp ponytail. No softness. No apology. I walked into the skyscraper like it belonged to me. Because soon, it would. I reached the 34th floor and stepped into the boardroom. 7 men. 2 women. All eyes on me. And when I began to speak, the woman they thought was broken owned the room like a general returning to war, not to beg, but to lead. The vote was unanimous. And just like that, I became interim CEO of the very firm Derek was bragging to his friends about joining. His offer letter hadn't even arrived yet. I had it in my desk drawer. Unsigned. He thought I was still just a consultant. Thought I was a detail to be managed, hidden, discarded. So the next move had to be quiet and devastating. I walked to HR and made one change. Derek's onboarding time was moved from subah ke 10 baje to 9:05. 5 minutes after the announcement. 5 minutes after he'd walk in, expecting to meet the team. And instead, he'd meet me. The woman his mother tried to scold. The woman he threw away like a napkin at dinner. The woman he said wasn't worthy of marriage. And the woman who now held the keys to his career. Because poetic justice isn't just a dish best served cold. Sometimes, it's hot. Like soup. And sometimes, it comes served with a promotion and a smile. At exactly subah ke 9:03, I stood at the head of the boardroom, flanked by executives and department heads. Everyone was still buzzing from the announcement. Naomi Pierce, interim CEO. Some clapped. A few nodded respectfully. But most, they watched me differently now. Not as the quiet strategist behind closed doors, but as the one finally sitting in the biggest chair in the room. I adjusted my blazer, looked down at the schedule. 9:05, new hire orientation, Derek Langston. Right on cue, the elevator chimed. The door opened. And there he was. Derek strolled in like he was still a man with options. Navy suit, confident smile, designer watch glinting under the lights. For 1 second, he didn't see me. He looked past me, toward the board, expecting applause, greetings, a handshake. And then our eyes locked. He stopped mid-step. Confusion flickered first. Then disbelief. And finally, the kind of realization that drains the blood from your face. He opened his mouth. I raised a hand. Have a seat, Mr. Langston. The room went still. No one moved. Because they would heard the rumors. But now they were watching it unfold in real time. Derek hesitated. Then slowly lowered himself into the chair opposite me. I clicked the remote. The screen behind me came to life with onboarding documents, his name in bold. Employee orientation, Derek Langston Junior Strategy Consultant. Junior. He flinched. I didn't blink. As the newly appointed interim CEO, I began, I'd like to personally welcome you to Langford Oaking. A few snickers rippled through the back row. I continued. You'll be working under the strategy department. Olivia Chain is your direct supervisor. Any issues, concerns, or future requests will go through her. He opened his mouth again. I raised my voice slightly. Any questions? His mouth closed. Eyes narrowed. Everyone in the room watched like it was a show. But to me, it wasn't revenge. It was justice, dressed in professionalism. I dismissed the meeting 15 minutes later. Most filtered out, trying not to laugh. Derek lingered. He waited until the room cleared, then finally spoke. You planned this. I turned slowly, folders in hand. No. You did. He scoffed. You could have told me. You could have defended me. Or at least not let your mother pour soup on me. She was upset. She assaulted me. You ended our engagement in front of your entire family like I was trash. You told me I wasn't worthy of marriage. He winced. I didn't mean it like that. You meant every word, I said, was cold. And now, I mean every policy I sign. Every restructure I approve. Every meeting I lead. So unless you'd like to be escorted out, I suggest you take this job seriously. Or don't. I paused. Actually, please don't. I walked past him. But not before adding. And Derek. Soup washes off.
But failure, that tends to stick. I left him standing there, his offer letter still unsigned, his ego bleeding quietly in a room that now answered to me.
The man who said I was of no use was now asking if he could keep his seat. And me, I had just begun.
By the end of Derek's first week, everyone at Lanford Oaking had a new nickname for him. The X.
No one said it to his face, but the tension wrapped around him like a second suit. He tried to act like it didn't bother him.
Tried to perform, louder, more aggressive, more eager to prove himself.
But the thing about men who lead with ego, they can't survive in rooms where competence is currency. And my office was the treasury. He couldn't keep up with Olivia's strategy briefs. Missed key metrics in meetings.
Recycled language from old decks, my decks, and passed them off as fresh.
Worse,
he talked down to female analysts in brainstorming sessions, assuming they didn't know their numbers.
They did. One reported it to HR.
Another, Jenna, who I'd personally mentored, forwarded me the incident notes.
I didn't step in. Yet. Because Derek wasn't just failing, he was exposing himself. Every smug comment, every misstep, every moment he thought charm could replace accountability. I just kept doing my job. Approving funding for women-led teams. Sponsoring a new leadership pipeline for underrepresented staff. Revising policy around conflict of interest, especially for hires recommended by executives with personal ties. That one hit a little too close for him. But he didn't dare push back. Not yet. Until his mother showed up. Vivian stormed into the lobby one Friday morning, heels clacking like they could intimidate the marble beneath her. Security stopped her.
She demanded to see the woman who humiliated her son.
My assistant asked if I wanted her escorted out. I said no. I said, send her in. She burst through the door like a warning. I didn't flinch.
I was seated, back straight, pen in hand. She launched into her monologue, voice sharp, tone shrill. You think this little performance makes you powerful. You have ruined his future. You're petty, Naomi. A beggar dressed up in a pantsuit.
I stood slowly, walked around the desk, looked her in the eye. Vivian, if I wanted to ruin Derek's future,
I would have signed his termination papers yesterday.
She blinked.
You can't.
I can. I'm his superior.
But unlike you, I believe in earning consequences, not manufacturing them. She sputtered. You poured this entire mess over him.
No, I said. You poured soup on me. I responded with structure, policy, boundaries.
Something you clearly never taught your son.
Security appeared in the doorway. I nodded once.
Please escort Ms. Langston out. As she was led out, she shrieked, You'll regret this.
I smiled.
I already don't.
The door clicked shut. And in that moment, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt centered. Because I hadn't stooped to their level. I'd risen from it. And left them exactly where they tried to bury me. Derek. He came to my office that afternoon. Knocked. Didn't enter.
Just stood in the doorway, small in a way I'd never seen him. You didn't have to let her in.
I looked up.
You're right. But I needed her to see what control really looks like.
He nodded. Left. And from that day forward, he kept his head down.
While I kept building, not revenge, but legacy.
Because the power shift wasn't in who had the louder voice. It was in who no longer needed to raise theirs at all. Derek used to walk into rooms like he owned them. Now, he looked over his shoulder, checked his tone,
second-guessed his jokes. Because power isn't always taken. Sometimes it's surrendered, quietly, day by day.
And Derek, he was unraveling.
At first, he tried to overcompensate.
Late-night emails. Buzzword-filled proposals.
A smile glued to his face so tightly, you could see the panic just behind it.
But excellence can't be faked. And Lanford Oaking was a battlefield built for warriors. He was an actor playing at competence.
One afternoon, he interrupted a presentation Olivia was leading, something I specifically warned him about. He tried to correct her numbers in front of clients.
But the numbers were right. His were old.
The client, confused, looked to me.
I cleared my throat. Please disregard the interruption. Olivia's projections are accurate.
Mr. Langston's information is outdated, much like his approach.
The room chuckled.
Derek flushed, eyes down.
Strike one.
A week later, HR flagged a report. Derek had failed to disclose a personal relationship with a vendor he pushed for approval.
The vendor. A friend from college. Conflict of interest. Strike two. Then came the final blow. He submitted a performance memo he didn't write.
One of the junior analysts, Ava, had penned the proposal in a brainstorming session.
He lifted her work, changed the font, added his name. She saw it in the shared drive and came to me.
I'm not trying to cause drama, she said. But this was mine.
I believed her. Because I knew that tactic. I'd lived it.
Strike three.
The board scheduled a disciplinary review. I didn't even need to attend. But I did.
I walked in wearing black, not for mourning, but for clarity. Derek sat across the table, pale, jaw tight.
The head of HR presented the findings.
Unauthorized sourcing.
IP misappropriation. Policy violations. He didn't deny it.
He just said, I was under pressure.
Then he turned to me.
You made this happen. I met his gaze.
No. You made choices. I just chose not to cover them up. They asked him to step down, effective immediately. He stood, fists clenched. You were never better than me. I stood too. I didn't have to be.
I just had to stop dimming my light for your comfort.
He stormed out. The room exhaled. Someone clapped. I didn't smile. Because this wasn't joy. It was justice.
A woman once told she was, of no use, had just held a man accountable with nothing but facts, proof, and policy.
No yelling. No soup. Just truth, served at room temperature. Later that evening, I found a sticky note on my desk. From Ava. Thank you for believing me.
I want to be you one day.
I stared at it for a long time. Then pinned it to my wall. Because I didn't just dismantle a man's arrogance. I built space for women who would be overlooked, like I once was. And no one could pour shame over that. Not anymore.
They scheduled Derek's exit interview for Friday at Sham ke 4 baje, the hour when silence sinks deepest and humiliation echoes loudest.
He showed up late. No suit. No smile.
Just a defeated man in yesterday's shirt, trying to pretend this was all beneath him.
I was waiting in the conference room. Not because I had to be there. Because I chose to be.
HR opened the meeting with a rundown of the exit process, benefits, final paycheck, access revocations.
Derek didn't say much. Until I looked him in the eye.
Any feedback for leadership before you leave, Mr. Langston?
He stared at the table. Then smirked. You got what you wanted. I leaned forward slightly. What I wanted was a partner who respected me. What I got was a man who couldn't handle a woman building something he couldn't fake. His jaw tightened.
This place poisoned everything. No, I said softly.
This place revealed everything. Your mother didn't ruin you. I didn't ruin you.
You were never built to lead, only to borrow power. HR glanced between us, clearly uncomfortable.
I nodded at her.
You can give us the room.
She left. Now it was just the two of us. And the quiet truth sitting between us. He stood.
You'll never find someone like me again.
I stood too.
I hope not.
He blinked. So I walked to the window, hands folded behind me.
You asked me once why I didn't fight harder for us, I said. Why I walked away so easily after that night.
He didn't respond. The truth is, I wasn't silent because I was weak. I was silent because I was done. You and your mother mistook quiet for permission.
But I was just watching the door you opened, so I could close it behind me. He exhaled, bitter. You always thought you were above me. I turned.
I was above you, Derek.
I just lowered myself out of love.
He left without another word. No handshake. No apology. Just the sound of his shoes against the tile as he disappeared into a future that no longer included a shortcut to power. I sat alone for a moment afterward. Not to gloat, but to breathe. The same air I used to suffocate in now felt crisp. Clean. Mine. I opened my laptop and typed one final note in his employee file. Resigned under review. Unable to adapt. Leadership integrity compromised. I closed the tab. Then opened another, finalizing the launch of our Women in Command initiative. A leadership accelerator built to make sure no woman ever had to beg to be respected at the table she helped build. The world didn't need fewer Dereks. It needed more women who wouldn't stay quiet when they were disrespected. And I was done being quiet. Because I had found my voice. And she wasn't interested in revenge. She was interested in reign.
6 months later, I stood under stage lights, looking out at an auditorium filled with women, founders, students, executives, dreamers.
The keynote was mine. Not because I demanded it. Because I earned it. They introduced me as
Naomi Pierce, CEO, strategist, and the woman who redefined silence as strength.
I stepped to the podium in a tailored suit the color of midnight, more softness this time. Just shine. And steel. I adjusted the mic. Took a breath. Then began. They told me I had no use. That I was unworthy.
That love was conditional, and that power was out of reach.
They poured soup on me.
I poured foundation under me.
Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not mockery, recognition. The truth is, I didn't build an empire out of spite. I built it out of clarity.
Because once someone showed you what they really think of you, you're free.
Free to rise.
Free to stop shrinking. Free to stop making yourself small just to fit in their frame.
I saw women crying, nodding, holding hands.
I saw myself, 10 years ago, sitting in the back of a room like this, hoping someone would tell me it was okay to stop begging to be chosen.
So I said it now. You don't need their seat. You need your own table. Build it.
Burn the old one if you have to.
The standing ovation was thunder. But the moment that stayed with me was after.
A girl in her 20s came up to me, hands shaking.
Her name was Maya.
I was engaged, she said softly.
Until he told me I needed to quit my job after the wedding.
That I was too ambitious to be a wife.
I didn't leave. Until I read your story. You saved me. I hugged her. Because that's the real reward. Not the paycheck. Not the title. But the ripple. That echo of strength, carried from one woman to the next. Later that week, I sat at my desk in the corner office. A letter sat waiting. From Derek. It was short. You were always right. I wasn't ready for you. I confused control with confidence. I hope you keep building. Even without people like me. I smiled. Then fed the letter into the shredder. Not out of hate. But out of closure. Because I didn't need his guilt. I had my growth.
I looked around my office, filled with light, with laughter outside my door, with the sound of women I'd hired taking up space.
And I whispered to myself. They called me a beggar. But I was never asking.
I was becoming.
And now, I wasn't just at the top. I was above the mountain they tried to bury me under. Not because I was lucky, but because I finally understood. Worth was never theirs to give. It was mine to know.